everybody. Welcome to The Bottom Line with Bob and Kendall Ehrlich. We have another potpourri session with an emphasis on
tax and spend.
Tax and spend. Just what we don't want to do.
So what we'd like to do is, there's so much potpourri every week. We love potpourri.
You love that word.
Anyway, potpourri in our show means we hit it fast. And the news of the week, we could probably do a show on each potpourri item, but this week we do want to focus on tax spend and the $3.5 trillion boondoggle presently before the United States Congress. In any event, potpourri, quick, my dear. First, headline, U.S. facing biggest homicide rate increase in decades. How shocked are you, Kendall Ehrlich?
And really, in decades. They're up 39%.
Yep.
And it's alarming. I know that there was a horrible story about a girl's murder this week that the national press gave tons of time to. But yet, 45 people were killed in Chicago 2 weekends ago. And it's just
and the
outrageous.
Weekend before that, and the weekend before that, and the weekend before that, and the weekend before that.
And it goes on and on and on.
Yep.
And it is, no one's paying attention to that. No one's reporting that. No one's emphasizing that. No one's protesting. And it's just terrible and shocking. And it continues as we have open borders.
Well, it's shocking, but it's not so shocking because when you defund the police,
well,
it's shocking but not surprising.
It's sad.
It's
lot
predictable.
Of loss of innocent people. That it may have been prevented. Who knows?
And no one cares enough to do anything about it, it appears. Second, hard left attempts to strip Iron Dome funding from the continuing resolution in the House. Now, they actually did it, but Democrats rescued Iron Dome. Iron Dome funding being the intercept system that the United States helps fund with regard to Israel.
Right.
It worked 90% of the time in the latest flare-up a few months ago. From Gaza with missiles falling into Israel. It just, again, is a reminder with regard to how the hard left, the progressive left, the uber left hates Israel. They really dislike Israel intensely.
And they really can't articulate why. They just hate Israel.
Well, they articulate, well, a few of them can't. Sometimes they refer to the occupation. They believe, obviously,
right.
Palestine under the occupation of the Israeli government and all that. But a reminder for moderate left Democrats out there who do care about Israel, when Israel really needs votes, where those votes come from, answer Republican Party. Third, Haitians at the border. The optics, the substance, I shouldn't say optics first. The optics were horrific. The substance is horrific last week under that bridge at the southern border. 15,000 Haitians, not from Haiti, by the way, they've been living in other countries, but decided to take up President Biden's offer to come to the border and come to the United States.
Why not?
Why not? The optics, though, were, again, so bad. The week before last, the Fox drone was taken down.
Well, it's a country without a border. I mean, you can't operate that way. And it continues, and it gets worse and worse, and no end in sight.
No end in sight. And where is that vice president who is allegedly in charge of that border? Next item, interesting here. For lefties out there, be careful where you fall on certain issues. The charge here is from the Black Lives Matter, medical Jim Crow in New York City. And by that charge, Black Lives Matter is saying, you know what? If, and this is the case, it appears, 72% of African Americans between ages 18 and 44 are unvaxxed in New York City. And the mayor of New York, de Blasio, has now rendered an edict that the unvaxxed will not be allowed into restaurants, etc. So that, in the eyes of not just Black Lives Matter, in the eyes of many folks, constitutes medical Jim Crow back in New York City today from the left, which is real interesting. Be careful what you wish for. The tables are turned, at least temporarily, on the Uber left and the de Blasio crowd.
But that's not being reported to too many places, right?
No, it's a very inconvenient story, is it not?
You dug for that one.
Yeah. Next item, Politico. why do we even talk about this? We saw the Fox interviews prior to the election, the Hunter Biden laptop, the emails. It appears all those stories that were not reported by the legacy media were true, including potentially Hunter Biden trying to get business from Gaddafi to unfreeze Gaddafi's assets in the United States. $2 million retainer allegedly on the table. You can't make this stuff up. You cannot make it up. I mean, the story here is not Hunter Biden. We kind of know what he's about, what he's been about. The issue here is, again, the press. This is Politico, by the way, finally a year later, coming out with a story that should have been printed prior to the election, but we know the bottom line of that election was. Our show's the bottom line. We get to the bottom line as much as possible. The bottom line was defeat Donald Trump, period. Defeat the Trump administration, period.
They were not going to put out the Hunter Biden story before the election, and their candidate didn't come out of the basement, for goodness sake. So
why should he have?
They hid the candidate, and they hid the stories about his son.
And it was pretty brilliant the way they ran that campaign, and they won. Last potpourri item is something that I don't want to focus on because it's just golf, but it is golf. And golf in our family is important. Golf in America and around the world is important. The Ryder Cup is always cool. You know, I want to go to my man cave and I want to sit there during Ryder Cup weekends and watch the Ryder Cup as millions of other Americans do. It's so much fun. It's football brought to golf. It's the only week of the it's the only event you can think of besides the Phoenix Open maybe
Right.
where it's a football crowd. There's booing. It's all sorts of also the rules are suspended. It's literally a football crowd. You're rooting for the home team. USA, USA, USA. It always gets you. Again, on the one hand, only golf. On the other hand, given what's happened these last 9 months, given the events in Afghanistan,
Given that the world had COVID, including the Europeans suffered from that. So it was good for everybody to be there.
Given people are still wearing masks in cars, given people are still wearing masks running outside, given that we had a high school football game on federal property last weekend, outdoors football game, high school, that we were expected, had to wear masks. Outdoors, at a football game. Outdoors. Because it was federal property. In any event, it was cool to see America on top. Again, I get only golf, but pretty relevant sporting event. And just to see the spirit and that American team come together as a team, diverse personalities, a lot of wealthy young guys out there, but it really meant something. You saw the emotionalism with respect to the American winners and the European losers. You saw Rory break down in an interview. It was really interesting, very exciting to watch. I'm sure the ratings will be very, very high.
Well, it's great competition, and I think that's part of it too. And we love rooting for our country.
And we like to win.
And we like to win, and that's okay.
And I have a
Winning
trivia
is
question
good
for you. What former president, he served not so long ago, brought this message to us: we should expect to win. It's good to win. He wanted to be a winner. His first name was Donald. His last name was Trump. And it's okay to expect and want
Donald
to win.
Trump.
You got it.
There you go.
All right, anyway, that's potpourri for the week. So, babe, we talked about this. I think it's important. People tend to get the eyes glaze over effect when it comes to fiscal policy in Washington. And nobody knows. We don't know. We're lawyers. We didn't do math. trillions of dollars.
No,
look
but
like.
you were in Congress and you had
Yeah.
to vote on appropriations, so
But
so you
trillions of
have that
dollars.
knowledge. No, I mean those are numbers we just can't fathom.
Just the average person can't
Right.
fathom. The average banker can't fathom. So I thought we would just go over real briefly the next 10, 15 minutes what's happening in Congress, because this is really a major policy move. This is the centerpiece of the Biden administration's domestic agenda. It's one big spending bill, but we'll get into it now. There are all sorts of diverse provisions, progressive provisions, liberal provisions, social welfare provisions built into this bill. So it's not just a $3.5 trillion spending bill. It is, again, the centerpiece of the Biden administration's domestic agenda from the left. So I don't want to get into arcane congressional stuff here. With regard to process here, there's something called budget reconciliation. So when you pass a budget resolution, reconciliation means what reconciliation means in regular life. You pass tax and spend provisions that reconcile those numbers to the overall budget.
Right. Makes sense.
In Congress, what it really means, its relevance today is you only need 50 votes to pass a bill rather than the 60 votes, the 3/5. So Democrats only need Democratic votes to pass anything under reconciliation. That is the bottom line to what's happening in Congress. That's the only thing people really have to remember. The inconvenient fact of life for Democrats in the Senate today is Senators Sinema and Manchin are in the Senate.
Right.
So that 50 sometimes is not 50.
48.
It's 48. And the vice president...
I can do that math.
Criminal defense lawyer, good job.
Okay, right, thanks. Prosecutor, too.
That 48 doesn't get to 50 because once you get to 50, the vice president votes for when there's a tie.
Right.
And obviously the Democrats carry the day. If you lose one of those Democrats, just one quote-unquote moderate Democrat, you don't get to 50 and you don't get what you want. So both Sinema and Manchin have stated their opposition. So again, to review, there's two bills. There's the 1.2 almost real infrastructure bill,
right?
Which
that
has
almost goes much less garbage in it.
It has infrastructure in it,
and it actually has infrastructure
roads, bridges,
in it,
tunnels,
which is
airports.
important, by the way.
Yeah, that's really important. Roads, bridges, tunnels.
Because people have been talking about this forever. Infrastructure.
It's supposed to be the great moderate bill because it appeals to both sides. Because,
but we need it. We haven't gotten started. Is the point?
And that's the why. And then there's this other bill, the $3.5 trillion, the quote-unquote human infrastructure. We'll get into that in a second. So 20 Republicans, you'll recall, voted for the first bill, the $1.2 trillion bill. The president, during negotiations with those Republicans, had promised that, look, no more add-ons. This is my deal with you. If you vote for this, which 20 did, they're not going to fool with the bill in the House.
We're not going to ask you for more.
Guess what? The House chairman, the Transportation Committee chairman, has stated last week that he wasn't on that deal. He didn't sign off on that. So what the House Democrats have done in committee is add billions of new public transit. Of course, they love public transit, not roads. Public transit projects around the country. Some GOP senators are shocked. They're shocked, I tell you.
Mitt Romney should not be shocked. He's been around long enough, and he should know better.
But here is the bottom line to this move at this time. Progressives will not vote for the smaller $1.2 trillion bill without the larger one, the 3.5, because they really care about 3.5, not the 1.2, because the 1.2 is actually infrastructure. So the problem on the other end now is that moderate Ds in the House and Senate, moderate Democrats, are nervous about $3.5 trillion in spending. So there you go.
Especially if they have election coming up.
Well, they do, obviously,
right.
in the House and a third of the Senate. So what's in the bill? What's in the $3.5 trillion quote-unquote human infrastructure bill? It is progressive heaven is what it is. You have amnesty. Now, you had amnesty until last week when the parliamentarian ruled that amnesty is not a legitimate part of reconciliation, which really means, for us laymen, amnesty was too substantive an issue to try to fit under budget reconciliation. It wasn't clearly a tax to spend. The Democrats have said, oh, listen, these people will work and they'll increase revenue into the Treasury, so that impacts the budget. And the parliamentarian said, nah, despite a lot of pressure from the Democratic majority.
Thank goodness for the parliamentarian.
Yeah. So amnesty's out. So what else is in the bill? You have the child tax credit. Now, child tax credit has bipartisan appeal. Republicans always try to expand it. To Democrats' credit, they try to expand it in this bill as well. But they also has other provisions, including climate change. Lots of grants, lots of tax incentives for clean energy. The president has a stated goal of, with regard to our power grid, 80% power from emissions-free sources by 2030. It's 2021.
Right.
We're not close. That's the quote-unquote goal. Politicians love to set goals because they sound real good when you say them real fast, even if they're not reachable, given the state of technology today. Emissions decreased under the last 4 years of the Trump administration. Nobody talks about it because of clean-burning natural gas. But nobody likes to talk about that because natural gas is a fossil fuel.
We had a great energy policy.
Yes, we did.
And it
Past tense.
went through the spectrum of various sources of energy, which is important. Remember when the windmills froze in Texas? That was a problem.
Yeah, that's a
so,
problem.
you know, we need to have our backups, and we need to be ready for that. It's part of the security of the country, by the way.
And, of course, what's the cleanest fuel? Nuclear.
Nuclear.
And the left will not
They
touch
don't
it.
even talk about that.
So we have climate change, we have amnesty out, we have child tax credit in, we have universal pre-K. Here's interesting, as a former governor, I look for stuff like this. Sounds real good when you say it real fast. Universal pre-K, 3 and 4 year olds. The bill is billions of dollars. Except there's a provision in the bill, states will pick up 50% of the bill when this program's up and running. So governors have to watch that. Congress loves to have press conferences. They love to give you big numbers. They love to give you, sounds real good when you say it real fast, policy objectives. But often it's the case that states are expected to pick up at least part of the bill down the road. It is an old game in Washington, D.C. Healthcare expansion, paid medical leave of up to 12 weeks, federally mandated. It expands, of course, Obamacare subsidies. It also expands Medicare. And everybody, quote unquote, is for expansion of Medicare. But interestingly, because in this case, it's dental, vision, and hearing added to Medicare. Except guess what? The American Dental Association opposes the expansion to dental. Why? Because the reimbursements are so low. Where have we seen that before?
Right.
Everywhere.
Exactly.
So they want to be paid if they have to do this. And if not going to be paid, they don't want to do it. Tuition-free community college. You want to be heard on this? I want to be heard on this as well.
Well, I don't think that community college is a very affordable. We have a great system here in Maryland, first of all, and it is very affordable, and it's an option for lots of people in different stages of their lives. People that might want to go back to school, people that don't know what they want to do if they go to a 4-year college. It gives lots of options, and it's incredibly affordable. So this money is going to be coming from your pocket, and it's just not the time or the place to do something like that.
I'm not sure there is a time or place.
Maybe
because,
not.
Again, it's community college. Listen, we both come from, you were solidly middle class. I was working class. We have those values. We appreciate during our public lives, we were big time pro community college. As you said, babe, there's so many circumstances.
I taught at the local community college, which is #1 community college in the country this year.
You were on the board too. You were on the board.
Anne Arundel Community College, and so I do not think that the taxpayer should be picking up this bill.
And I have a related observation, which is more free stuff.
It's not free.
It's not free.
It's not free.
And guess what? Here's a shocker. A little provision in this bill. States are to pick up 25% of the new costs down the road. So it's not just the feds picking up the cost.
So then it's not just going to be your federal taxes rising. It's also going to be your state taxes rising because of these mandates from the state. And overall, this whole list, let me tell you something. This is what people hate. All of this sneaky stuff in this bill, when most people will come together and say, we need the infrastructure. Why? Because in their community, there's some bridge that they're worried about or a road, or even some public transportation that would make life easier, or an expansion of a bridge that would make life easier. So they're for that. But all of this, what you're talking about, that's what infuriates people.
And here's how right you are. There's also a provision concerning the state pickup that the states would be forced to pick up the 25% of the additional costs, and they could not do it at the cost of diminishing their existing dollars that go to to community college, because governors will play that game. Okay, you make me pick up 25%, I'll just diminish my dollars going into that fund in the first place. Not going to happen here in any event. So it's another federal mandate is what you're talking about on governors. Nobody's talking about this. This federalizes right to work, this bill. So 27 states
that'll go
now,
to the courts.
27 states have right to work. This is a state issue. It's never been a federal issue. It shouldn't be a federal issue. Pro-labor states don't have right to work. It's their business. Anti-right to work states want to have right to work. should never federalize anything.
It could be
like this.
constitutionally challenged for sure.
And of course, there's a tax enforcement provision here where we hire thousands of new IRS agents because we need the additional income to pay for all this. So, irony of ironies, we're paying for new IRS agents, but not new Border Patrol agents.
Wow. It's
Care to
exactly
expand on that? Wow.
it's exactly what I said. People, the average person is thinking like I'm thinking. I kind of bring that perspective to this show. What is the average person thinking about that? They're like, they don't want that. They don't want their representative to be voting for that.
They voted for it in the last election. They voted for this.
They didn't know that. They did not know that. There was so much publicity about the mean guy as opposed to
Mean tweets.
any indication of exactly what this meant in raising taxes. And Biden said he wasn't going to do this. So
No. He said he was going to. He said he was going to do this, but people making under $400,000 would not be touched.
Okay.
Is what he said.
That's exactly what he said.
Right.
So many people thought that they wouldn't be touched, but they are going to be touched by that bill. That is for sure.
That is
So
the
it's-
easiest prediction you've made today.
But it's the lying. It's the people are tired. They're exhausted from the lying, and our country is not as strong as it was a year ago. It's not as strong as it was
Well,
in
that's from
so
our
many
perspective.
levels.
That's from our perspective.
That's from our perspective,
No
but
doubt.
I think many people are thinking that out there.
Concerning tax and spend budget reconciliation, we just talked about a few of the provisions in this monstrosity. How do you pay for it? Well, Washington always has a game where it's not. It's actually a requirement. You're supposed to pay for this new spending. $2 to $3 trillion worth of tax increases. Now, the Democrats have a menu. The Majority Leader in the Senate, Schumer, last week said, "Oh, we've agreed on our tax package," and all the other Democrats said, "No. We've agreed on the agenda. We haven't agreed on the exact taxes we want to raise." Clearly, part of this package, part of the Democratic resolution tax increases will be the corporate income tax. President Trump cut the corporate income tax from 35 to 21. In the developed world, the average is 23.5. Under at least some of the proposals, one proposal I've seen concerning where the Democrats want to take the corporate income tax, the combined between state and federal would be 30.9, really 31%, which would make us less competitive in the developed world, which is not good tax policy.
Yeah, when the corporate tax got cut, what did that do?
Economy
It
took off.
created jobs, right?
You're asking me
And
easy
how about
questions.
our latest jobs report? Oh, it's underwhelming. No kidding.
Yep. So, as I said, there's going to be a menu of new taxes. Now, we want to be heard on this because I figured this out when I was a young legislator. They're going to double the federal tobacco tax, which is a sin tax. These liberals always go to sin taxes, which is interesting because on the one hand, they preach how evil tobacco is. And we're not fans of cigarettes by any means. We don't smoke in our family. We know what it does to people. Everybody knows what it does. On the other hand, you got to hope, if you're from the left, that more people are going to smoke because you are now funding $3.5 trillion worth of new spending, at least in part, through a doubling of the federal tobacco tax.
This has been going on for years. They
What a
should
shell
just
game.
outlaw it. But of course, they're not going to outlaw it because they're
they need
reliant
numbers.
on
They
the
need
dollars.
phony numbers. They need phony numbers to put in these fiscal reports.
So they want you to be healthy and they don't want you to smoke, but not really.
Not really. And, of course, this disproportionately falls on working class folks.
Of course.
Regressive in that sense. So,
Do you know a pack of cigarettes is a huge amount of money? My mother smoked, and I remember cartons of cigarettes for what a pack of cigarette is now. I was shocked when I heard it in a convenience store one day. Somebody said that would be $8. I was like, $8?
well, as I go down to my daily Wawa stop, right? My
Right.
daily Wawa stop to get my coffee and get my coffee for Mom,
Right.
the lines are long, and typically people are buying tobacco products. So, in any event, it is what it is. Please don't buy leftist rhetoric when it comes to tobacco. Oh, it's evil. We want to double. We want to tax it double, triple, whatever. They need that revenue to make these phony numbers less phony. Last point here. There's a sideshow going on people need to understand as well. It's not that complicated. So in the House, the Democrats married a debt ceiling hike, the federal debt ceiling, the full faith and credit of the United States, to a continuing resolution which keeps the government running. All right, so that's in the House. Leader McConnell in the Senate, GOP leader, says, we'll happy to support a CR, we call it in D.C. a CR, continuing resolution, keeps the government running, going to the airport, transportation folks will still be there, still get Social Security checks, all that stuff. But since you're doing this through reconciliation, you know what? You pass the debt ceiling by yourself. You pass it with Democratic votes. Mm-hmm. We're not on board with that. We're on board with the CR. We're not on board with the debt ceiling. So McConnell, in this sense, wants the Democrats to be on record with regard to how they're going to fund the $3.5 trillion. The moderate Democrats, on the other hand, because this would necessitate the Democrats coming up with an actual new debt limit number, they don't want to be tied to that number in the midterm elections. Mm-hmm. So McConnell's figured this out. Democrats don't want to pass debt relief alone. It's a big game of chicken. We've lived this game of chicken many times when it comes to CRs in the past.
Federal employees live this game of chicken because they want to get paid.
Because the federal budget process is so dysfunctional because appropriations bills never get signed or passed on time these days. You have to have a continuing resolution because you got to keep these agencies operating.
Right.
So we've lived this when I was a member. We've lived this since then. It's just part of the dysfunction in Congress concerning the budget process. The bottom line to this is the Democrats passed the CR on a party line vote. If the Senate Republicans block this, Democrats are going to have to scurry to pass a clean CR. And we'll see what happens with the debt limit because the Republicans, in this sense, typically lose these budget battles. In this case, because the Democrats can do anything they want with 50 votes under reconciliation, including the debt limit. The shoe's kind of on the other foot here. So it's a little bit complicated in that sense. Big-time politics. Not a lot of people are paying attention, but the repercussions, the consequences are very real when it comes to funding the federal government. So lots of politics playing out. Democrats are very happy to have 50 votes, but sometimes those 50 votes really aren't 50 votes. And when it comes to really tough votes, 50 votes is potentially very difficult in the midterm elections. So there you go, babe. Tax and spend, real infrastructure bill, a phony infrastructure bill, quote-unquote human infrastructure, big-time politics playing out. Stay tuned.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. And if you want a common sense bottom line, please go to bobehrlich.com.
Common sense, absolutely. Thanks for listening, everyone. Godspeed.